Hey everyone, as always Jarek here, and welcome to a perfect example of why I didn't play games on the Wii back in the day. This game is chock full of gimmicky motion control garbage that is just not fun. It's a little confusing, because every time I looked up the best first-person shooters on the Wii, Medal of Honor Heroes 2 is one of the games that will come up. And all the comments will say something along the lines of, I had so much fun when I played this as a kid, when I was 5. I think that's kind of the reason why they had so much fun with it. Looking at the reviews, they're all pretty negative, so it makes a little bit more sense. My only conclusion is that the Wii just didn't have many first-person shooters, so this had to be thrown on there because what are you going to compare it to? This game came out in 2007. You really didn't have many true first-person shooters on the Wii at the time. And no, rail shooters don't count. I'm not playing in an arcade, those are boring as hell, I'm not interested. Alright, so let's just get right into it. Starting with the graphics. They're butt ugly. Now there's a reason for that. If you're like me, your first thought was, well, before I play Medal of Honor Heroes 2, I might want to play the first one, right? I mean, it's a sequel, I should probably play the one that came before it. But, for some reason, the one that came before it was a PSP exclusive. Yes, they made a sequel to a PSP exclusive on the Wii. Now, to be fair, Medal of Honor Heroes 2 also came out on the PSP, but having it come out on the PSP and the Wii is a really odd development. Anyway, the result is a game that looks even uglier than most Wii titles. Textures are incredibly low res. That's supposed to be wood, if you couldn't figure that out. Jaggies are all over the place. It's genuinely difficult to see enemies at a distance. What am I looking at? And most importantly, when you want your game to be as serious as it can get, to convey that there's real consequences here, use only brown and gray. This game has no color in any way whatsoever. That was the big thing at the time. Every game needed to be brown and gray. Even Far Cry 2 fell into this, but at least with Far Cry 2 I can mod that out. This is actually kind of a bad example because there's too much color with that mod, but still I could do it. In Medal of Honor Heroes 2, that's simply not an option. Not only is this an ugly PSP port to the Wii, but it's just not pleasing to look at either. A game can be outdated graphically, but still be a pleasure to look at if it has some nice aesthetics to it. I mean, hell, Far Cry 2 is another good example of that. But this game just looks like every generic World War II shooter you have ever seen. And again, this wasn't like it came out in the early 2000s, this came out in 2007 when we were already moving on. And you know what the real kicker is? What you're seeing isn't even how bad the base game would really look. You're seeing footage from an emulator at a higher resolution with anti-aliasing. The game is originally going to look like this. Yeah, it's bad. These problems even bled over to the audio. You would hear audio from angles that made no sense. Enemies shooting from behind you when there was no one behind you. They were in front of you and to your left. I hear bullets like behind me. Is that just me? The audio might be fucking up. Oh, shit. I died around a wall. Cool. You hear it too? Is my audio fucking up? Hold on, let me see.
Front, left.
Nope.
Front.
Needless to say, even for the Wii, this game did not look good and was outdated. As for the story, it doesn't fare any better. You're playing as the hero Americans fighting the Germans again, as if you've never seen this before. There's no interesting characters, the entirety of the story is explained to you in a cutscene before each mission. For the record, these vertical lines are an emulator issue, you won't typically see them and you don't see that in gameplay, just felt like pointing that out. But you really have seen this story before. You play as a secret agent going undercover to stop the Germans from using a super weapon. That's it, that's the whole story. More importantly, the way it is portrayed to you is just through a cutscene at the beginning of each level. It's just the mission briefing. That's it. Medal of Honor Heroes 2 puts very little effort into the story, so I'll put very little effort into analyzing it. Let's go on to the gameplay. As I said at the beginning of this video, this game is a prime example as to why I didn't play Wii games back in the day. This game is just chock full of motion-controlled jank that add nothing to the experience but frustration. The most frustrating thing about this is that some of these controls are actually pretty good, and then most of them are miserable. For example, the basic aiming feels perfectly fine and is pretty easy for a Wii title. They even do some really clever stuff. If I want to lean from around a corner, I hold down the A button to aim down sights, and then I tilt my nunchuck left and right to lean. This is great because it still leaves the analog stick open and I can still walk while I'm leaning. On top of this, if I want to reload, I just flick the Wiimote up and I start reloading. This frees up extra buttons on my controllers. Some things are done right in this game as far as controls are concerned. But then the ones they mess up so poorly and so frequently that the whole game is a frustrating mess. Let's start small. The sniper. With the sniper, you press your aim down sights button to scope in. That's pretty normal. But if you want to zoom in, you tilt your Wiimote left and right. This is a little annoying because when you're trying to aim, you naturally are going to tilt it. They fixed this by having one of the triggers locked to that zoom level. This is not really intuitive, nor does it feel natural. On top of that, the basic aiming while you're scoped is already kind of messed up. It feels like it has a weird acceleration where it starts slow then suddenly speeds up and just doesn't feel good. But that's not miserable, it's just slightly annoying. Oh, it gets worse. How about throwing a grenade? I mean, there's no way they can mess that up, you just make a throwing motion, right? Yes and no. For starters, when you want to swap weapons, you press left and right on the D-pad. For some reason, grenades are part of your weapons. Up on the D-pad doesn't do anything, so they could have just mapped grenade to up on the D-pad, but they didn't. So occasionally you're going to cycle through your grenade when you want to get to your next weapon. On top of this, pressing down on the D-pad makes you crouch, so a lot of the times when you go to swap weapons, you just accidentally crouch or stand up. And no, you can't rebind your controls. But okay, once you pulled that grenade out, you press the trigger, then you make a throwing motion, and you throw the grenade. Pretty straightforward. The problem comes from when you want to cook a grenade. In order to cook a grenade, you press the A button which pulls the pin. You may think that then you just make a throwing motion and you throw it. But no, in order to throw the grenade, you need to press the trigger, then make a throwing motion. Why can't I just make a throwing motion? What makes or breaks a good motion control is if it's intuitive, if the player doesn't need to think about it before they do it. And even in cases where there are intuitive controls, they still somehow mess it up. This anti-air gun? Just make circles with the nunchuck and you should go left and right. But it never worked. So the default controls don't work for this, but I found the motion of giving someone a titty twister actually did work. As long as I wanted it to turn left, I couldn't get it to turn right. So good job. Even when you do have intuitive controls, they don't work. On top of that, I don't want to do this shit, just let me use the analog stick to look left and right. But it gets way worse. Occasionally you'll come across these radios. In order to tune to the right frequency, you have to tilt your Wiimote left and right. Once you turn to the correct frequency, you're going to be hearing someone saying, "Please come in." The kicker is that you only hear this through the speaker on the Wiimote. Cool, fine, whatever. More annoyingly, this is really specific. You can hear someone asking you to come in, press A because you think that's the right frequency, and it'll tell you it's the wrong frequency. To make this even better, it's timed. Why? That makes no sense. There's nothing happening in-game, there's no sense of urgency. Why is it timed? Don't you hate it when you're trying to find your favorite radio station in your car, but you have to do it within 10 seconds otherwise it changes frequency? Yeah, that doesn't fucking happen. Oh, but believe it or not, it gets better. Here's my favorite example of their motion control fuck-ups, the Panzerschreck. Now you may think, well, it's just a Wiimote, right? You just press the button to zoom in and then you just look around and then you can aim. Like, how messed up could it be? They want you to lift your Wiimote over your shoulder, pointing behind you, to aim down sights with the Panzerschreck. At this point, you're probably asking, well, it's a Wiimote. I need it to be pointed at the sensor for it to work. How do I even aim with this? The answer, you need to aim with the nunchuck. Which also means that as you're doing this, you're aiming and you cannot walk. If you want to walk, you hold the trigger button down, now you can walk, but as you're doing this, you can't aim. Who thought this was a good idea? This game is chock full of examples like this. They tried to go way overboard with the motion controls, and it really is just a gimmick that is annoying as hell. There is no reason to add this stuff, just make a good game. Again, the difference between gimmicky motion controls and good motion controls is just how intuitive they are. The leaning thing is a fantastic example of something being intuitive that works and aids in the gameplay. The Panzerschreck has them just for the sake of having them. I don't want to feel like I'm playing a game of charades just to fire a rocket. Hey, here's a regular controller thing they managed to mess up. There's no sprint. Okay, fine, I can adapt to that. But here's the thing about that. There is sprint in this game, but only in the multiplayer. Why? And I haven't even gotten to what the actual gameplay is. It's bullshit fuck garbage. You've played this game before. It's another World War II shooter that we got bored of 6 years before it even came out. You have regenerating health, you can only carry 2 weapons, the levels are linear as hell with chest-high walls everywhere, enemies constantly pour out of clown closets, you have certain objectives you need to do, and this game has tons of artificial difficulty. The best this game gets is a generic World War II shooter walking down a linear pathway. At worst, It's frustrating as all hell. If there is an objective, I can guarantee you this game is trying to fuck you over. A lot of this is trial and error, which is extra frustrating because these checkpoints suck. Sometimes you have 2 checkpoints right next to each other, and other times you have a checkpoint across an entire level. The very first level has the perfect example of this. You get to this point, you have to fight through a bunch of Germans. Eventually you get up on top of a bunker where you take a sniper and have to snipe a bunch of enemies. You walk back down that hill, have to fight through a bunch more Germans, eventually do the stupid radio minigame. You again fight through a bunch of Germans, get to the top of this bunker, and you finally get a checkpoint. The most reasonable thing to do here would have been to give you a checkpoint after the sniper section and to give you a checkpoint after you've dialed in that radio frequency. But no, if you die at any point in between this, you are going all the way back. This is a good 30-40 minutes of progress you will lose. Now, as someone playing this on an emulator, I did what any sane person would do. I tried to make a save state. I found out this game is not very stable with an emulator, and if you make save states, it makes the emulator crash. I was at the mercy of the checkpoint system in this game, and they're fucking terrible. As I said, levels will have objectives you need to do. And while you're doing those objectives, it will frequently try to screw you over. Not even in ways that make sense, just in ways that are cheap shots that will turn the game into trial and error. For example, here, you need to put a charge on a submarine, but you have to be standing on the submarine, so the moment you set that charge, you need to book it and get out of there. But the moment you set that charge, enemies start pouring out at you. Somehow you need to fight your way through those enemies that can melt you and get off the submarine before it blows up. Naturally, you kind of want to play this slow, but you can't. And really that sums up the entire experience playing this game. Enemies will non-stop pour out of doors at you. These are clown closets. They don't stop pouring out at you until you make your way through them. However, they can melt you, so you want to play it slow and sit back. But you can't because they won't stop spawning if you do. So eventually you're going to have to find a way to push through them, or you'll run out of ammo, or they just won't stop. To make things even better, their guns disappear pretty quickly, so you can't even get more ammo from them. This leads into a constant cycle of being in a disadvantageous position. It straight up feels unfair to the player. It's tedious, it's frustrating, and it wears you down. Clown closets are something I never forgive in shooters. It's the biggest pet peeve I can think of. I hate it when games do this. But then take it a step farther and just ambush you when you can't do anything about it. For example, when you're on this AA, you need to destroy their anti-air. Once you blow up the first one, enemies pour out at you faster than you can get off the turret and will melt you. I mean this in the most literal sense. You cannot get off this turret before you take damage. At this point, it feels like RNG whether you live or not. It doesn't matter how fast you mash the button to get off the turret, you are going to be taking damage. It's straight up bullshit and is just not fun. The enemy AI and the friendly AI are pretty stupid. They can't seem to kill each other worth shit, but they can nail you perfectly fine. At best, your friendly AI are just there to be bullet shields for you, and they're pretty useful at that. At least you're not being targeted by every enemy within 500 miles. Alright, let's talk about guns for a moment, because that's something I do on this channel fairly often. I find a guns implementation in a video game to be pretty interesting. I'm sure you're all aware of that by now. But I don't see a realistic depiction of a firearm to be mandatory to have a good video game. I mean, Black is a great example. These guns make absolutely no sense and look unrealistic as hell, but the game is great because the guns are fun to use. If a game has realistic depictions of weapons, then that's just bonus points to that game. However, in the case of a game being based in World War II, this is a much bigger issue, because that actually happened. This was a real event in our history. If the facts don't line up with what happened, it's a constant reminder that I'm playing a campy video game. Let's take the MP40. It just chugs along. It has a pretty slow fire rate. That sound of the MP40 firing is synonymous with the German forces. It should sound something like this. Well, in Medal of Honor Heroes 2, it sounds like this. So in this game, the MP40 has a faster fire rate than the Thompson. First off, what? Secondly, that's a bigger issue than you think. As I said, the sound of an MP40 firing, the report of that weapon, is synonymous with the German forces. You can understand why changing something as fundamental as the fire rate of this weapon is a big deal now. Also, every gun has the iron sights tilted upward, so it makes it really difficult to figure out where the gun is actually shooting. This isn't how iron sights work. Where are my bullets going? To make it even worse, there's so much muzzle flash that I can't actually see where the bullets are going either. After a certain point in this game, Medal of Honor expects you to fight your way out of a pit with enemies that have Panzerschrecks at the top that can instantly kill you. And that's where I said, fuck this shit, I'm out. This was a little over halfway through the game, and from what I see online, it gets way more difficult than what I already had. Fuck that, I'm gonna keep myself sane. I don't need to see any more of this game. It's frustrating, it's full of motion controls that make no sense, it's a terrible World War II shooter. And I really want to emphasize here, the fact that this takes place in World War II is not the problem here. It's the fact that it feels like every other World War II shooter. Be the hero Americans, storm D-Day again, have the same feeling guns, the same feeling enemies, nothing changes. All of these games are interchangeable. It's almost as if these developers didn't realize the war was called World War, and more people were involved than just America and Germany. There are so many stories that have not been told in World War II that I would love to see, and portrayed in ways way better than what we got. You don't turn everything brown and gray to try to make it seem serious and deadly. Instead, you could take mechanics like, say, from Red Orchestra 2. In fact, you could just take Red Orchestra 2 as a whole and give it a single-player campaign, and I would be all over that. The fact that a multiplayer-only game got atmosphere down better than any of these World War II shooters is baffling to me. So if you're looking to catch up on some Wii games you missed, skip this one. It's not fun, and it'll make your night miserable. Thanks to everyone that came over on Twitch and watched me suffer while I was streaming the game. If you want to join me in the future, my Twitch is twitch.tv/JarekTheGamingDragon, and if you subscribe, you get to see my videos ahead of time. Thanks all of you guys for watching, and I'll see you next video.